Hello, live viewers. Welcome to the Onyx Path Publishing YouTube channel and our live Q&A with Mr. Ian A. Watson regarding the Aberrant RPG, which is currently on Kickstarter, and I will end up being crucified by Rich and Ian and others if I don't constantly point out that the link to that Kickstarter is in the video description below, and we have passed 200% funding. We've done so well so far, but I have no doubt that it can only get better. So please do check it out if you haven't already. I'll probably be mentioning that a few times during the course of this video, so apologies in advance for being repetitive. The purpose of this video is twofold. We're going to be discussing some of the questions and comments that got submitted on my video from last week, which was the Aberrant RPG Have Your Say. And we're also going to be responding to live questions and comments that are submitted during the course of this video. I'm going to ask you to hold off on your questions immediately. By all means, chatter away in the separate chat box. But when I open the floodgates for questions, then please submit them. It's a lot easier for me to keep up with them as they're being submitted live than having to backtrack through the chat box, because YouTube's funny like that. But with that said, I am still going to load up the video so that I can make sure that I can keep up with the make sure I can keep up with the chat as it's going on. Let's see. Yeah, YouTube has this fantastic feature now where you can pop out the chat.
Oh, really?
So you don't even need the video running in the background. So I have done that. This is the hallmark of preparation. But first, before I start asking questions, some people may not be familiar with you, Ian. How about introducing yourself and telling us a little about the Aberrant RPG for anyone who doesn't know?
Sure. I'm Ian Watson. I am the community manager for Onyx Path Publishing. So if you contact us via Twitter or Facebook or whatever, that's usually me you're talking to. I'm also the content lead for the Trinity Continuum, which in this case means I am sort of the grand overseer of all of the Trinity Continuum lines. And I was part of the development team for Aberrant, which is currently on Kickstarter, and you should all go there and back it right now.
Lovely. Okay, and I'm going to occasionally intersperse these questions, Ian, with other random comments that have been left on the Aberrant RPG Have Your Say video, because some people just wanted to express their opinion about things completely unrelated to Trinity. So we'll see if we can catch you off guard.
Okay.
So
I'll do my best.
So the first one is from Alessandro Bruschi. Not knowing much about Aberrant the game, besides what's told in the Trinity books, I would like to see some sort of mechanic akin to Dark Side of the Force in Star Wars, a shortcut to power that also can and will change and corrupt you. And I'm also very much looking forward to seeing what reactions the various societies of Earth have to these superpowered heroes. Is there anything like that in Aberrant, a shortcut to power that dooms you?
There is indeed. One of the unique features of Aberrant, which you don't see in a lot of superhero games, is the concept of what we're calling transcendence. As you increase in transcendence, the less human you are, whether that's physically or psychologically. So Dr. Manhattan, for example, from Watchmen, might be a good example of someone with very high transcendence, where the needs of humanity don't concern him as much anymore because he's just kind of beyond that.
Well, that actually ties in nicely to something Joseph Edge asked. He says, I would like to be able to scale the level, street to so on, maybe even run a superhero league or Hoboken styled game. Is that possible in Aberrant? Is it possible to scale it from, I guess, Watchmen level through all the way to, well, you've already mentioned Dr. Manhattan, Watchmen through to Justice League?
Absolutely. Aberrant builds off the Trinity Continuum core rulebook, where the main character type in there are the talents, who are people with an extraordinary amount of skill and luck. So that's basically your standard action-adventure superheroes. Well, not superheroes, just heroes in general. So Jason Bourne, the cast of Leverage, the cast of the A-Team, MacGyver, And that would also include most of the members of Watchmen, or if you wanted to do like Punisher or Daredevil or something like that, that would fit in there too. And going with Aberrant brings, you know, the actual things that are, you know, impossible for humans beyond human scale, brings those in, and those can go, that can get pretty crazy. So yes, you can play a wide variety of characters with the Aberrant system.
Excellent. And this is my own question, because of course you look at a group like the Justice League, for instance, or even the Avengers, and there's often a range of powers within the group. Some games obviously respond well to having mismatched levels of power in the same group. Others very much aim at everyone being either godlike or street level. Does Aberrant support, or could Aberrant support, having that mismatched level of having Green Arrow and Superman in the same group, as an example?
You absolutely could. I don't see any reason why you couldn't. We didn't spend a whole lot of time trying to do any white room balance to make sure, like, okay, Hawkeye is on the same playing field as, you know, Captain Marvel or anything like that. They're two different character types, but they each have their own strengths and weaknesses. So a talent is going to be able to do things like dramatic editing, where you can actually sort of almost narratively take control from the story guide momentarily. Talents can do that, but Novas can't. So even if you're, you know, shooting fire out of your fists or whatever, that's some impressive stuff. But each type has its own thing that it's capable of doing that others can't.
Yeah. So and a lot of people have become familiar with this from the They Came From Beneath the Sea Let's Play that we did on here as well. The idea of that cinematics, which was introduced in Trinity before it was introduced in They Came From. Obviously, it was skewed somewhat in They Came From to that B-movie style. But yeah, that idea of having narrative, almost protection around your characters, where, as with many stories, I guess, of underdogs and street-level heroes, they have to be beaten up a few times before they can be victorious. Right. So there's a mechanic in the game that allows them to do that. So we have, and you answered this one on the video, but just in case anyone hasn't been reading the comments, Banda1 says, how about a Who's Who book on Aberrants, like Shunned by the Moon, but for Aberrants?
We have hit a stretch goal on the Kickstarter right now called the Proteus Nova Compendium, which is going to be I think the first step for that was all of the little character bios that you see in the core rulebook, or the Aberrant rulebook, will get stats added. And we've hit a couple of extra stretch goals such that any character that hasn't appeared in the Aberrant rulebook but has appeared in the previous edition, they'll get write-ups as well. So there should be plenty of material for you to use with the Nova Compendium.
Lovely. Now, Navath Masad has a very long comment with some of what they loved, some of what they hated about old Aberrant. And I think sometimes it's useful for us to see what people did or didn't like about the game of old. So, for instance, what Navath enjoyed in previous editions was how mostly realistic Aberrant was, but also the really dark setting that at the same time was still full of hope. But with heavy signs, things would be going downhill, which in the meta plot of the old edition, it did. But things that Navath hated, didn't like the rules at all, found that they weren't scaled appropriately, and powers were priced by an insane person, says Navath Masad. So the questions that this commenter has is, please tell me powers are better thought out and at least slightly play tested this time.
Yes, they are. The system that we're using this time is the story path system, which has it has a clear familial descent from Storyteller, but it's a new system, and it was designed from the ground up to be able to scale to different power levels. So if anyone used mega attributes in the original edition, you know, they broke pretty quickly and they broke hard. That's been taken care of this time around. The whole system, it runs so much more smoothly than the original system did, and it was like we very much had Aberrant in mind when we were designing story paths.
Another one of Noah's questions is, how quickly can we expect supplements for Aberrant?
As soon as we can start writing them, really. I mean, we need to finish the rulebook first, but once that's done, we'll get to work on supplements, just like we did with Aeon. We've got about 3 supplements for Aeon in various stages of development right now, I think. And like, that's just since the Kickstarter last year. The core rulebook isn't even out yet, but in terms of development, we're finished with it.
And it's worth noting as well, anyone who is at all unfamiliar with Aberrant or just excited to read it ahead of time, like with all of the Kickstarters Onyx Path are running right now, you can gain access to the manuscript of the book if you back. And that's being released bit by bit to the backers, so you can read it in its current version, and that's useful to us because it means you can provide us with feedback, but it's useful to the customers, the fans, because it means they have a sense of what it is they're buying. So yeah, please definitely check the manuscript out if you're interested and you're a backer, and you only have to back at a pretty low cost to get access to that manuscript. So do check the Kickstarter out.
I think you can just throw in $1 and get access to the manuscript, and if you don't like it, you can always back out.
But you wouldn't want to do that.
No.
And Navas' final question is, I need more powers. No matter how many you put in the core book, I just need more. That's less of a question, more of a demand.
I mean, okay. The powers, I think there are definitely some that we put in that weren't in there in first edition. One example I gave on a previous podcast was I took inspiration from Infamous, the PlayStation games. So now you can sort of refill your own quantum on the fly without needing to rest by draining energy from your surroundings. And you can specify, like, okay, I can only drain smoke, or I can only drain shadow, or whatever. So you can have sort of an elemental filter on that, but just as written, it's just 1 from 1, drain energy, get quantum. So that comes directly from Infamous. But the other powers we have, even where it's just straight from first edition, they're a lot more flexible now than they used to be. So there's a lot more chance of you being able to drill down and get the powers that you want for your character.
And a final comment from Navath is also, Divis Mal did nothing wrong. Now, for anyone who's unfamiliar with Divis Mal, what can you tell the viewers about this Aberrant character?
Divis Mal is sort of our Magneto equivalent. He's been a Nova longer than pretty much anyone else in the setting. He's been around since the 1920s. And he came up with a philosophy called Terras, which the core of Terras is that all Novas are sovereign individuals. They can't be held to, human laws and conventions because they're beyond humanity. Just like you wouldn't expect a human to be held to the conventions of any of the other great apes. So Terras is a good philosophy which would work if everyone else was Divis Mal, but they're not. So it causes some problems, as everyone has their own idea of how to practice Terras in their own way, and those ways don't always mesh.
I'm going to ask a question that's that could be quite incendiary, and again, that's one you have responded to in the comments on the previous video, but again, not everyone reads those comments. So Rodney Kelly says, I have no interest in an RPG about superheroes. More often than not, they become allegories for discrimination. This makes the discriminated superior to the average human. This is the same theme as in Alienation and with the Psi core of Babylon 5. In real life, people are discriminated against because they are different, not because they are superior. How would you respond to that, Ian?
Well, there is discrimination that happens in the world of Aberrant, but it's not, most of the time, it's not because, someone can shoot fire out of their ass. It's, in the case of London Fog, for example, London Fog is trans, and she has received, some hate, some attacks, because she's trans, not because she can control the weather. So it happens and people are trying to deal with it, but for the most part, it's not because people are novas.
Okay, thank you very much for answering that one. So now we've got a slightly off the wall question that was submitted along with that previous video. Yep. Kindred of the East 20th anniversary when? By Silas Espantoso.
I don't think we're going to see Kindred of the East again anytime soon. The original edition was pretty problematic in a lot of ways, starting with the name Kuei Jin. It does not make any sense whatsoever from an Eastern perspective. There is no way anyone, either from a Chinese or a Japanese context, would look at those characters and read it as Kuei Jin. So that's why in Beckett's Jihad Diary we used one Kuei instead.
That's right.
But yeah, it's just doing Kuei Jin again and doing them properly would require such a massive overhaul, and at least for the 20th anniversary edition, that's sort of like a greatest hits album that's celebrating what has come before, and there's no real way to celebrate the Kuei Jin by sort of bringing back what made them great, but also doing such a massive overhaul on them. So it's probably not something we're going to touch.
That's fair enough. I will say that if Kindred of the East is your thing, it is a slot that's available on the Storyteller's Vault. There are people producing supplements for it. So if you love Kindred of the East, as originally was, then you can still purchase supplements for it. But yeah, as Ian says, it's probably not a path Onyx Path will be journeying down. So Casey Johnson just makes some requests. So for instance, there's a few requests here. Comic book artists doing the book art. I know you can comment somewhat on our webcomic that's been going up, as well as an official handbook of interesting NPCs that you've already mentioned that, and their powers. More thorough info regarding the costuming of characters, avoiding basic dated 90s looks. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Character costuming. Don't always consider that. But with all those ideas thrown at you, are there any that you want to respond to?
Costuming is not something I think has really come up except in the in-setting invention of U-fiber, which is sort of it's like the Fantastic Four's unstable molecules. It's what various novas use to make their costumes, and it helps them store quantum energy, and it can sometimes change design to look like different things. Not entirely unlike when Peter Parker wore the Venom symbiote. But yeah, I've never really thought that the original Aberrant was terribly 90s. You can see everyone's feet. No one's wearing an excessive amount of pouches.
I sense the spirit of Rob Liefeld being summoned here.
Quiet. Yeah, like Rob Liefeld was, I mean, let's face it, he was responsible for a lot of sort of the 90s aesthetic. And the first edition of Aberrant didn't really dig into that a whole lot. It was still sort of, the skin tight spandex look for most of the characters. And yeah, we're mostly going with that now. I mean, it might be something interesting to dive into, like if you want to go for a more almost militaristic, like Marvel Cinematic Universe look instead of the spandex, where it looks like an actual uniform rather than like an outfit, a costume. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to raise. It's not something we've sort of put a whole lot of attention to. What were the other questions?
Also mentioned the whether we could get any art produced by comic book artists.
That is unfortunately not up to us. That is up to our art director, Mike Cheney. I know he's reached out to some people who do comic book art, and we did have the Aberrant comic that we've got posted on our website right now that has a couple of well-known, a writer and an artist who both do quite a bit of work in the comic industry. I don't know who or if we'll be getting comic people on the book itself, though. I know we have at least a couple who you can see their art on the Kickstarter page if you want to look up who they are. But for the most part, it's up to Mike, ultimately.
Yeah. So if you're watching this, Mike, probably not. But if you're watching this, Mike, there you go. Fan request. Ethan Bremner actually leaves a very lovely long comment regarding Aberrant being the most important RPG he's ever played, making lifelong friends through playing at college, which is just fantastic. It's always wonderful to hear and read stories like that. I got a tattoo of the superhero symbols of 3 of my characters.
Oh, wow.
So that's lovely. And as for the game itself, the thing I have wanted since the beginning is 2 supplements for the events between the games. What happened to Maxwell Mercer? Are the Inspired rolling around with Novas? What happened to cause the Novas to leave before the events of Trinity? I know these are all things we can explore with our own thoughts, but there is gameplay content and storytelling background that might better assist us in telling these stories.
Well, one of the things that we're doing with this edition of the Trinity Continuum is, while Adventure, Aberrant, and Aeon are sort of the 3 tent poles, and they are special eras for various reasons, we're not limiting ourselves to those. So we are going to have... I don't know how big they're going to be. It might be, a small little book. It might be a chapter. It might be a full hardcover core rulebook. I don't know. That remains to be seen. But we're planning on doing things in between the Aberrant era and Aeon. We're planning for things that happen in between Aberrant and Adventure. We're planning for things that happen centuries before Adventure and centuries after Aeon. So there's all sorts of plans in the air. And although not all of your questions will necessarily be answered, like exactly what happens during the Aberrant War, for example, it will help fill in a lot of the blanks.
Perfect. Terry Moore says, I prefer Aberrant to be within the curve of 4-color and gritty without hitting either extreme. Where would you say it lands as, I guess, a default setting?
The default setting is sort of a Marvel Cinematic Universe approach to it. First edition was more deconstructionist Iron Age. I used to describe it as if X-Men were taking place in the world of Watchmen. So this time around, it's more of a Marvel Cinematic Universe thing. So there is your aspects of realism to it, and things are a bit more hopeful, but it's not full 4-color either.
Perfect. And another question off the wall here from Crassus Maximus. Aberrant is great, but when are we getting a new edition of Whole?
Unfortunately, Whole, which for those who don't know, Whole was one of the first games published under the Black Dog label way back in, I want to say, 1996, thereabouts.
I think you're right. It's 96, yeah.
Unfortunately, it was published under license. It was never owned by White Wolf. And I think a second edition was published by Kabil Games about 10, 15 years ago. I don't know if they still own the rights or someone else does, or if anyone's planning on doing anything with it. But whatever it is, it's not White Wolf and it's not Onyx Path, so we're not going to do anything else with that. Sorry.
Was it White Wolf or the or Kabil Games that did Butthole?
Oh, Buttery Wholesomeness?
Yeah.
It was the first time it was released. It was done under White Wolf just after the first rulebook came out. But I think they did release a second edition of that as well.
Ah, I didn't know they did a second edition of that. There you go. Well, you learn things in these videos, viewers. Rob Walker Films wants to know if we'll be seeing a new version of Adventure! In the future. I love games with exclamation marks on the end, as we know.
Yes.
We will.
We can't confirm it yet because we need to see how the Aberrant Kickstarter does, just like we didn't announce Aberrant until about a week or two after Aeon had wrapped up. But We are doing some of the early preliminary work just in case. Things are looking good, obviously, since we're past 225%. So odds are, yes, you'll be seeing a new adventure.
We have a lovely long comment from Maurice Oakes regarding things that he loves and loves less about Aberrant, largely in first edition, although there's some reference to the content of second as well. Mostly it's a whole lot of praise. And Maurice says he's over the moon that Aberrant is on Kickstarter right now and can't wait for more previews. Daedalus League for the win with a big side of new Terrigen. So it looks like there's a fan of Aberrant. So that's
I appreciate it.
Let's see. What does Kerwin say? Kerwin says, I might just be addicted to the story path system line, but I just love what I've read so far in and about Scion 2nd edition, the Trinity Continuum, and soon Aberrant. These games give you so many options how to build your game worlds, and you're always free to set the theme and mood of your campaign to your personal taste. Pledge to the Aberrant Kickstarter, of course. So not a question, just a lovely comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And what else do we have here? We also have Nanook Harper giving a lovely rundown of what they love and what they don't love. Specifically, combination powers, don't love them. Thematically cool, but functionally poor. Bear in mind, this is first edition commentary. Second edition, in terms of powers scaling, as Ian's already relayed, the story path system really does have you covered there. It's a system that has been stress tested across Trinity, Aberrant, Dystopia Rising, Scion. They came from beneath the sea, and it works for each of these games. And that's no small thing. So yeah, we're happy with story path. We think it does the job. Let's see whether we have any questions here. So Hero Kane says, it's been mentioned that unlike in first edition, you can in fact play an Ironman-like character. This is cool as it means broadening what can be played. A bit more light in the setting and guidance that doesn't lead to everything collapsing into what exists in Aeon. Example, we see in Aberrant the signs of the US going towards the FSA. That should not be the automatic thing I see when I see the US in the game. Do you have anything in mind there when it comes to playing the Iron Man character and the trek towards the FSA?
Well, in terms of characters like Iron Man, we have a much richer super science section in this edition than we had in first edition, and that builds off the super science material that was in the Trinity Continuum core. Some of the introductory paragraphs for that technology section got posted as a preview on the Kickstarter earlier today. So if anyone wants to have a look at that, you're welcome to. There are 3 basic levels of tech. One is just sort of enhancements on existing technology that even without Novas, humans probably would have come up eventually. But, you know, Novas are the first ones who made that particular connection between 2 different fields. So, you know, they can get rich just improving on an existing process or whatever. Then you have Nova Tech, which is technology that can only be created with the involvement of a Nova. So either someone has to be like, okay, this medicine can only be synthesized from Nova blood, or a Nova has to be involved in the production process, or something like that. So that might be something where you get like a Tony Stark style Iron Man suit. Then you have Quantum Tech, or Q-Tech, which is technology that doesn't work without a Nova. Sometimes it doesn't work by any known physical principles. No one knows why it works. It just does. It's as close as you can get to magic. And it's fueled by the Nova's own quantum reserves. So using our new system, you can come up with an Iron Man style suit. Although in this case, Tony Stark does sort of, most likely Tony Stark is a Nova in this case.
Brian Altry, again, lots of praise here. I'm honestly not sure what I can ask for other than what I have gotten so far from the backer material. I'm waiting to receive the quantum powers portion of the manuscript before I think about that sort of thing. But so far, I'm fairly pleased, and I trust you guys. You guys have been very transparent with us fans, and as a satisfied backer of the Scion 2nd Edition Kickstarter as well, I know you guys will do right by us.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's always lovely, isn't it? How often do we hear songs of praise?
Not often enough.
No. That's not to say all of you people watching are permanently critical. It isn't. It's just often the criticism cuts through like a knife. Travis Legg, that old rogue, says, I would very much like to see a collection of starter adventures that showcase the flexibility of Aberrant across subgenres of superheroes, with each adventure acting as an issue 1 that introduces the elements of the subgenre, sets up a basic conflict, and plants a few seeds for where the campaign can go after the adventure is concluded.
Funny you should mention that, Travis, because that's another one of our stretch goals, the Novas Worldwide supplement, which is going to be sort of a jumpstart, not entirely unlike In Media Res was for the core rulebook, where it's just sort of a bunch of different starter-ish adventures just to get you going. And we could probably... we have nothing but the name at the moment, but eventually we'll probably have like different dial sets, so one can be a little bit more four-color, one can be a bit more deconstructionist, just so you can get a different taste of what Aberrant can do.
I'm just going to give some shout-outs now to people who have really broken down their thoughts on Aberrant without asking any questions. But Silat Lian Ilam Sweden gave a lovely breakdown of what they like about superhero RPGs, as did Chris Halliday. Cole Soak also says way more in love with Aeon and Adventure than Aberrant, but made the best Aeon villains thanks to that game, so that's good. And that's something you can always do if you have games that are interconnected, and this extends to Chronicles of Darkness and World of Darkness too. You can always use other games to fuel your antagonists, even if you don't use them as your player characters. Osiris Malkovich loved Aberrant, and Thomas Mertens loves the dark superhero genre, so that's nice. I'll see whether we've got any more questions here. Leslie Schaefer wants to just see lots more source books, and it sounds like we're getting them. Let's see. Berriorn says, as for an actual question, in the last decade, superheroes have really boomed thanks to the efforts of Marvel in the West and things like One Punch Man and Boku no My Hero Academia in the East. To what degree will Aberrant be influenced by their take on the superhero genre?
Well, I'll be honest and say I haven't seen much of the Eastern-inspired things like One Punch Man. I'm aware he exists, but that's about the extent of it. But as previously mentioned, a lot of the tone of Aberrant is much closer to the Marvel Cinematic Universe than the previous edition was. So that was a very strong influence on us.
High Level Games says, my absolute favorite RPG setting of all time. It's the depth of the setting with the pulp and supers and sci-fi elements in just the right mix to continue to be exciting and engaging. So wonderful. Thank you, High Level Games.
That's what we're doing.
Yep. Nicholas Friedwall says, I love adventure. I like the idea about Aberrant, and I never really got the thing about Aeon Trinity. Well, it's not too late, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but I think Trinity Continuum is still on backer kits.
It is still on backer kit.
Probably not for long.
Probably not for long. It's I just put in a couple of last-minute changes to Cheney earlier today, and that is like the cutoff point, and everything is going to the printers like probably next week. So within the next couple of months, I think people should start seeing their rulebooks coming up. And obviously, once that starts, the backer kit will end.
All right, we've got 2 more questions on the original video, and then we'll go on to the live ones. These are a couple of long ones.
Okay.
So one is someone's take on the setting, and it's a fairly lengthy one, so bear with me, but there's some interesting ideas in here, and a question at the end. So Philip Doring says, there's an idea I had that I believe would fit perfectly with the setting, the dawn of human augmentation. Novas have left humans, for all intents and purposes, obsolete, except for the few lucky that managed to erupt. Humanity realized that the only way to stay relevant was to upgrade themselves by any means necessary. Since eruption means a mystery and quite unreliable, new paths had to be explored. This has created a new gold rush in research and development regarding human augmentation. As a result, cybernetics, genetic engineering, and other similar technologies have experienced an unprecedented progress thanks to massive investments by paranoid governments and greedy corporations. Ironically, Novatech helped quite a bit. And so by 2028, the technology of cyborgs like Adam Jensen from Deus Ex, super soldiers like Captain America, and even mutants like Wolverine exists. But if that's the case, then where are these new augmented humans? Well, there are several reasons why augmentation hasn't become more widespread yet. Governments and corporations want to keep it as a secret asset for as long as possible. The technology is still too expensive to be available to everyone, and the general public has access to only the most basic levels. Many think it's a cheap imitation compared to Novas, etc. So, the question, what do you think? Does it fit? Thanks for your feedback.
Yes and no. In this setting, people like Wolverine and Captain America are going to be represented as Novas, not as augmented. I have mentioned in a couple of the other interviews on podcasts that the setting for Aberrant here is 2028. 2028 is the same year as the recent, the 2014 RoboCop reboot. That's set in 2028. The two most recent Deus Ex games, one set in 2027, one set in 2029. So the timing is certainly right for various augments, and we have sort of seeded some of those hints in the Aberrant rulebook. I believe there's a reference to Optech cyber products in Detroit in the timeline section, and obviously that acronymizes as OCP. So if we do a technology book for Aberrant, I would love to dive into cybernetics and how humans feel like they have to compete with Novas in sort of the idea space, the workspace. So, you know, they're going to start cashing in on some, getting in on cybernetics. Like it's the perfect time for it, so I would love to get into that if we can.
Perfect. Okay, final question on the original video, and then we go over to the live viewers. And thank you very much, everyone, for viewing live. It's wonderful that you have come to watch this live. As I say, Aberrant is currently on Kickstarter. One of the reasons we're doing a live Q&A is to excite people about that. The link for it is in the description below. So if the things that Ian and I have been talking about, mostly Ian, let's be fair, have enticed you at all, please do check the Kickstarter out, even if it's just for the art. And I have to say, the art for this game is amazing. I'm a big fan, of course, of the art we produce for a whole heap of our games, but Aberrant has been such a breath of fresh air to my aesthetic palette, one could say, if you're as pretentious as I am. So I think you'll probably find the same thing. If you go over to the Aberrant Kickstarter, just have a look at some of the art we're including in this game, and I have no doubt you will be impressed.
Absolutely.
So, the last comment is, it seems, by Ric Flair. It's actually by someone called Hammered.
Okay.
And it's in relation to the wrestling RPG sourcebook that we have funded with the Kickstarter.
Yes.
So he says, Matt, woo! By God, Dawkins, woo! Did I hear you mention a wrestling RPG? Woo! A wrestling RPG that you hope to be involved with? Let me ask you this, brother. How is there to be a wrestling RPG if the wrestling god has to be hoped to be involved, brother? Woo! I'll put it like this. Put your name on the dotted line and you'll have a backer right here, brother. No matter how much I need to pledge, I promise you my shoes cost more, brother. Woo! I want to see the dice rolling, comment section scrolling, RPG writing, cool fighting, not afraid to post, not afraid to host, Daddy-O Brigade General. Woo! Clack, click, bang involved. Thank you very much, Hammered. I think that was his encouragement that I need to be involved in the wrestling sourcebook for Aberrant, and I fully intend to be. It's obviously somewhat of a passion project for Eddie, Webb, and myself, and we will be working together to with Ian and the rest of the fantastic minds behind Aberrant to make something that's appropriate. And the very idea of novas being wrestlers or sports entertainers, if you prefer, isn't really too far off how professional wrestlers are presented today. Professional wrestlers are comic book heroes. They, for no explicable reason, take all of their conflicts to the ring. They take all their clothes off except for their underwear. They fight. They oil themselves up. They wear ridiculous costumes when they do wear costumes. They do things to each other that defy expectation and belief. Why it almost looks choreographed. And they are able to take destructive blows to their bodies and somehow come out the following day wrestling again with no bruises. So the line between superheroism and professional wrestling is practically non-existent, especially if you're looking at the WWE product. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to getting my hand involved in a wrestling RPG, and the Aberrant Kickstarter has funded one as a part of the Aberrant universe. So if that isn't incitement enough for you to back the Aberrant RPG, I don't know what is. So with that said, let's have a look at the live comments. So I'm going to scroll up first. And let's see if anyone left comments before I asked them to.
I think a lot of people came in after you told them not to leave comments.
I think so, but that doesn't mean I'm going to not hold it against them.
All right.
Matthew Mallis says, Aberrant uses seven distinct scales. How are they defined and how do they interact? There is confusion in durability versus might scale.
As earlier stated, I'm the content lead over the Trinity Continuum in general. I was not responsible for putting together a lot of the specific mechanics for things like powers. So you can talk to Steve Kenson, who wrote a lot of that, or you can talk to Danielle, who is our story path guru. They would have a much better idea of how all of that stuff holds together. I can't help on a lot of those questions. I looked over things and it looked good, and I gave my stamp on it, and it moved on to playtesting, and that's about my involvement on the powers.
Don't worry, I always have the same thing if someone starts asking me about hunger and Vampire the Masquerade. I know of it.
Yeah,
no, I know it's a good idea.
There.
Yeah,
yep,
I didn't come up with it. But Matthew, if you need to know where to make that comment, I recommend leaving it on the Kickstarter. It's the best central source of where to get that information, or post on the Onyx Path forums. They are both good places to look, and failing that, go on the Onyx Path Discord. That is also a decent place to look. If any of you viewers right now have a link to the Onyx Path Discord, I would appreciate you posting it in the log so those of you watching can join it. David Fuller says, tell us everything about the wrestling supplement. Well, I just kind of did. The Lady Gamer says, how would you explain Aberrant to someone who has never role-played before? Go for it, Ian.
Oh, geez. Who has never role-played before? Okay. Can I take it as understood that they at least understand what a role-playing game is? Because
let's remove that barrier to entry.
Okay. Aberrant is a superhero role-playing game where your choices matter. Not just in the sense of, say, like if Tony Stark invents something, you have to come up with, some reason for why that technology doesn't just instantly proliferate, and like why isn't everything being powered by the energy thing whose name I can't remember right now. The thing that he has in his chest that powers.
Oh, yeah, I don't know the name of it.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah,
like
we're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, in the first Avengers movie, he sets one up that powers the new Stark Tower, and then Stark Tower is essentially abandoned like 2 movies later. Why is this energy not powering everything? Like it's essentially, like, I wouldn't say free energy, but it's super cheap energy. So a lot of comic books, both like the original comic books and superhero movies, they have to constantly sort of keep resetting. Superheroes are there to reinforce the status quo. They're not there to change anything. In Aberrant, you can change things. how are you going to change the world? What are you going to do with the power of a god? And that's not just the technology you invent. That's you're an instant celebrity. You have a cult of followers. Every one of your actions is going to be scrutinized. What are you going to do with that kind of responsibility?
I've always loved RPGs where you can play a character with corporate sponsors, like you're a NASCAR driver or something like that, but flying. And
yeah, Greg Kinnear did that in Mystery Men.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and Aberrant plays into that, as Ian says. As your superheroes are instant celebrities, they can, they can do things that normal humans cannot. Then there's a lot of corporations who want to take advantage of that, and it isn't always for obviously malevolent aims. It's to make money. So if you can be the smiling face with thumbs up on their corporate banner, and you're also the person that destroys this, and this for the good of humanity, then they love you. They'll support you. They'll put you in a house, and they will provide you with everything you want, every vice that you want to fulfill. And it's quite easy to see how Aberrants can go off the deep end as a result.
And it's not just, being a superhero with a licensing deal with Coke or whatever. You can be a super intelligent Nova who goes to work for Microsoft, and that's just your job. Like the possibilities are endless. It's great, and everyone in the chat is yelling "Arc Reactor" for Tony Stark's device. So thank you for that.
All right. Adrian Bedingfield says, "Is Aberrant going to be a crossover with World of Darkness?"
It is not. World of Darkness is owned by White Wolf. The Trinity Continuum is owned by Onyx Path. It used to be a White Wolf property, but when Onyx Path formed, Rich bought it from CCP at the time. The two were never really connected, although there were a couple of sly nods and winks between the two in a couple of supplements over the years. But the two continuities are completely separate.
High Level Game says, "Can you tell us more about how Terrigen differs in this edition from the previous one?"
In the previous edition, the Terrigen were more of a group, like, say, Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants, where it was like something you could belong to. Whereas in this version, it's a bit more sort of like anonymous, in that anyone can really be a member. Really, membership in the Terrigen is mostly defined by whether or not you follow Terras. If you're reading our online webcomic with Antaeus, Antaeus is a member of Project Utopia, and he may also be a member of the Terrigen, sort of. He doesn't make it explicit, but that's sort of the direction we were leaning in. And Project Utopia might not be totally happy with that, but he's doing enough good work for them that they're willing to sort of overlook it.
We have 3 requests here from Josh Heath, David Fuller, and Clara Herbal, all asking to be hired to work on Aberrant. So, I think that's a good sign in when you can, through a Q&A, convince writers to work on a game line. So you've done something to sell the game.
I hope so.
Let's see, what else do we have here? And Preston Bobo is recommending using the StoryPath Nexus for creating content for Aberrant. I don't believe Aberrant is going to be opened yet, but it will be, I have no doubt, in the future. For anyone who is unfamiliar with the StoryPath Nexus, it's a community content program that will allow you to create content for games like Scion. Probably they came from Aberrant. It's likely to happen. It essentially enables people to use the StoryPath system and the worlds that we have already created for the StoryPath to create their own source books, sell them on the StoryPath Nexus. If you're familiar with the Storyteller's Vault, the DM's Guild, Canis Minor, or Sluresian Vault, you will have a general idea of what's going on there.
Currently, only Scion is open, but that should open up as we get more of our stuff released.
Exactly. And so, yeah, if you want your big book of costumes for Aberrant, I think that's probably a fine place to put it.
Yeah.
So what else do we have here? Well, you can all start submitting questions now, by the way, if I didn't let you know. We've got 10 minutes left, so I will have to choose some really good ones out of those. So I'm getting to the people who posted questions ahead. Is there going to be a hero that runs around saying language when people swear? Says Adrian Bedingfield.
I'm not planning on it, but your game is just as canon as ours, so if you want that, go ahead.
So yeah, you could have the chastiser, who
Yes.
upon hearing vulgar language goes shh or language, and it silences them. It prevents them.
I'm thinking of that one character from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy who just had a list of like every known being in the universe and just went to visit them individually.
Yes.
To tell them how much he hates them.
Yeah.
Just like that, except to chastise them.
Yeah, he appears, it's like he just sort of kicks them in the leg and says, "You're a jerk, you're a real loser,"
Yeah.
and then he flies off in his spaceship to another part of the galaxy. Yeah. I'm trying to remember which book that's in now of Hitchhiker's Guide. I think it's the third one. Since Aberrant is basically a dark comic book world, would we see things like Elseworld stories in the same vein as Superman, Red Sun, Dark Knight Returns, etc.? Asks Keegan Sullivan.
Yes and no. That sort of thing might open up on the story path nexus. I don't think we're going to do... Like, we have enough stories to tell in just Aberrant. Like, people are always going to ask us for more supplements for Aberrant without diving into alternate settings. But in terms of the continuum as a whole, there's probably going to be some small settings which crop up, which aren't part of sort of the A timeline, if you will. Stuff that wouldn't make sense as part of that timeline, just sort of veer off to the side and explore this weird little setting that sounds cool and then go back to the main stuff.
Banda One says, will the Coalition be an Aberrant or hints about it?
The Coalition is still very far distant from Earth, and there's a reason First Contact is made in the Aeon setting. It's made in 2122, I think. So it is a very recent thing in the Aeon setting, and that's like 100 years off from where we are here in Aberrant. If you want to use Aeon material in order to bring the Coalition to Earth 100 years early and have them as an alien threat, you're more than welcome to. It's just not part of the main timeline.
Cyril Pasto says, the future has changed since the 90s. How do you address that in regard to the alternate history of the game? Will there be more climate change in the Aberrant timeline, for instance?
Well, one of the things which is consistent across both the original edition and the new edition is Novas have used their superintelligence to fix, for example, the ozone layer. That's fully patched. It takes superintelligent Novas to, like, obviously we're not doing a great job of handling things ourselves, so a lot of Novas are sort of taking the reins and trying to fix things as best they can. Usually Project Utopia Novas. So in that sense, things haven't really changed a whole lot. Things are still sort of... The climate is still sort of going downhill, but Novas are trying to turn that around.
Okay. Nathan Henderson asks, can we hope for a supplement on optional conspiracy plot lines, since the core setting conspiracy was rightly removed?
If we do some material on Proteus, some extended material on Proteus, then I can see some potential conspiracies being included in that, but I don't think we'll do like a supplement on conspiracies.
John Russo asks, how difficult would it be to do a crossover rules-wise between Aberrant and Scion? And I don't mind answering this one and saying, not really that difficult. I mean, some of the more granular powers, how Aberrants access their power, or Novas access their power, I should say, and how heroes in Scion access theirs are, of course, very different. They're from different sources. But the core system of both games is the same. It's still story path. It's still going to be skill plus attribute. And you still have the possibility of using such tools as momentum, to reward yourself upon failure or upon accepting failure. So the building blocks of both games are the same. The foundations are the same across all story path games. So crossing over wouldn't be that difficult. Whether that means we'll end up doing a book on it is something far in the future to consider, but it's by no means impossible to cross them over, just as you can cross over any Chronicles of Darkness game with a little bit of wiggling.
Yeah, it's not going to be a perfect fit. A lot of the details need a little bit of nudging. For example, in Scion, a normal human is scale 0, whereas in Aberrant, a normal human is scale 1. So the whole scale system is different in between the two games. So you might need to do some adjusting, but by and large, it shouldn't be too difficult.
No. From someone whose name I unfortunately can't pronounce as I don't understand that alphabet, do you think you could run a more surreal and abstract superhero RPG along the lines of your average Grant Morrison story?
I think the engine is flexible enough that you could, but that's not what we're aiming for.
No, you could definitely have a Nova zapped off into a pocket plane where it all becomes very meta, and they are aware of gods essentially playing role-playing games with personalities. But yeah, it's not ever going to be a main theme of the game.
Right.
So let's see, what else do we have here? Ethan Bremner says, I already got my question answered from the other video, but here's a small but related one. Enkidu in Aberrant.
Enkidu is, for those who read the original edition of Adventure, Enkidu was a super intelligent gorilla who, from a lost gorilla city who was trying to gain admission to the Aeon Society for Gentlemen. Although he is probably still around in the Aberrant era, he's not anywhere that anyone is going to find him.
Okay, Bounder One says Shunned by the Moon is just excellent. Love, love, love. Thank you very much. Night Horror Shunned by the Moon is a recent well-forsaken source book, came out about a week or two ago, last week in fact, and it has gone down very well, receiving a lot of praise, so thank you very much for that slight aside. We have some people waiting for V5 Sabat. You will need to take that up with Paradox. Ask them for the book. It isn't currently on the Onyx Path docket to make it. Nathan Henderson asks whether, because aliens are such a staple of superhero fiction, will we see an Aberrant era space supplement? I know you've already mentioned about the fact that First Contact isn't made for another 100 years, but can you see Aberrant working in space?
Yes, one of the allegiances we've got are the Daedalus League, which are founded by a couple of spacefaring novas. So if you look in Aeon, especially our upcoming supplement Distant Worlds, you can see that there are nova colonies that date back to this era, although not as early as 2028. So it is within sort of the next 5 to 10 years that some of these get founded. So you can be on the front wave of these nova colonies getting founded as people are exploring other worlds and maybe running into some alien races. Who knows?
We're going to have a couple more questions now, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay.
So last couple of questions, and thank you very much everyone who has submitted these. It's been very kind of you, and engaging with these kinds of things is always incredibly rewarding for us. So thank you so much for all of your excellent questions.
Yes, thank you.
They really dug, quite deeply into Aberrant as well, so that's good. I think there's been a nice combination. Michelle Masala says, as both a comic book and RPG geek, I tried other hero games but never found one that worked for me. So tough question. What are Aberrant's strengths, and what do you feel makes it special compared to others?
Well, as mentioned earlier, Aberrant is a game where you can make a difference. You can change the world. There is the whole novas as celebrities thing going on, which a lot of other settings don't dive into either. There's a very strong element of celebrity culture and how that affects things like social media. Even in first edition, obviously social media wasn't as much of a thing back then. You get me. There's also the transcendence mechanic where the longer you're a Nova, the more powerful you're a Nova, the more likely you are to slip into that inhumanity, that separation from baseline humans. So there are a lot of aspects of Aberrant that make it sort of unique and distinct that a lot of other games don't dive into at all.
Travis Legg says, can you talk a bit about the setting changes regarding Andre Corbin and the Aberrants faction?
I would love to. So since there was no Proteus Nova sterilization conspiracy like there was in first edition, we wanted Project Utopia to be like, these are the good guys, these are not, the bad guys to rebel against. Since there's nothing to rebel against, the Aberrants faction didn't form this time around, and so the Aberrant name went to one of the divisions of the Terrigen instead. So while we were developing this, I said, okay, what are we going to do with Sophia Russo and Andre Corbin and the rest of the members of the Aberrants? And then it came to me that why not do something more sort of a Black Ops version of Team Tomorrow called Team Tonight. That's one of the things I'm happiest, because the whole thing came to me like all at once. When deeds must be done by darkness and tomorrow is too late, you call Team Tonight. They're the plausible deniability. They don't have the bright blue and gold costumes. They go in, they get the job done, and they get out.
Perfect. Okay, so a few more questions here, and there's some quick fire ones that I'm going to answer. So, for instance, Ichiel Johnson says, "Is there a free quick start? I would like to run a one-shot with some friends to test Aberrant." Well, as Ian mentioned earlier, you can back the Kickstarter for $1 and you get access to the full manuscript. Ian, quick question: is there a quick start or jump start plan for Aberrant?
We will almost certainly be doing one. Yes, we're doing one for the Trinity Continuum core. We're doing one for Aeon. I don't think it's currently up on the schedule because we're still in the middle of the Kickstarter, but odds are very strong that we will be doing a jumpstart for Aberrant as well. But obviously, we're not totally done with the main rulebook yet, so we don't have a jumpstart ready.
Yeah, and we also have Robert DeBrock saying, "I'm a huge fan of the Trinity Continuum. As you all just said, Aberrant has baseline humans at scale 1 and Aeon has them at scale 0. So would a talent or a Syad in Aberrant be at scale 1 still?"
Probably.
Yeah, I think they would be, because the adjustment in power level isn't vast. So yeah, I think that'd be at scale 1 off the top of my head. And Robert DeBrock also says, would a second edition of Adventure be a possibility? As mentioned earlier, Adventure is something we will look at doing depending on the popularity of Aberrant. It really depends. I think it's fair to say Adventure was the least popular of the three originally, wasn't it?
Sort of. It did very well, but at that point, low sales had canceled Aeon and Aberrant, or Trinity and Aberrant. So Rich Thomas had to fight to get Adventure made just as a single rulebook, not as a full game line. And it did very well for a single book, but not enough for it to spring like an entire line off of that. Hopefully we'll turn that around this edition. We've had some time to build up a decent fan base for it. I would love to get into some supplementary material for Adventure for the first time, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, you know me, I love a bit of two-fisted pulp, and yep. So yeah, you never know. I might be involved in that one. Well, I might try to be. So with all that said, there's a couple of announcements I want to make. And I want to again say thank you very much to all the viewers for all your fantastic questions. It's been very much appreciated. If Aberrant is very much your thing, not only is it on Kickstarter, linked in the description below, we are also going to be launching an Aberrant actual play on our Twitch channel. Not our YouTube channel, our Twitch channel. I'm sure the footage will eventually make it over here, but we are going to be doing live streaming on Twitch. We're going to be bombarding Twitch in earnest. So please do, I forgot to put the link in the description below because I'm an idiot. Please do type in Onyx Path Twitch into Google so that you have that website bookmarked. We will give times and dates of games that are going to be run via our various social media as and when we can, but it will be a nice introduction to you if you're unfamiliar with Aberrant and want to get to know what that game's going to be about. And that isn't where we're going to stop. We're going to do lots of games on our Twitch channel. It doesn't mean Wraith will be stopping. Wraith will still be going up on here, but please do check out Twitch if Twitch is your thing, and if it isn't, give it a go. The only other thing to do for me to say is, please, if you haven't already, check out our Aberrant webcomic. It is a beautiful piece of work. Paul Jenkins already pulled out all the stops on it, and it can really help immerse you in the setting. I've got to be honest, before the run-up to this Kickstarter, I knew very little about Aberrant, but the comic has really helped me just get a feel for the world of Aberrant without even having to dive too deeply into the manuscript. So I recommend checking out the webcomic. You can find it by going on the onyxpath.com, and I am sure Ian can also post a link to part 1 of the comic in the chat log that's running right now if you have missed it, or indeed the latest part. Entirely up to you, Ian, what you post.
The latest page actually went up at the same time that we started this stream, so everyone can head directly over there to check that out as soon as they're done here.
Perfect. So yeah, with all that said, thank you very much for all of your interactions. Thank you, Ian, for agreeing to be a guest today.
Oh, thank you. It was fun.
And yeah, do check out the Kickstarter. We would love to see you there. And if you go to the Kickstarter off the back of this video, this is an interesting tool for us. You know, it's very slapdash whether it's effective. But if this video has convinced you to give Aberrant a look and you back the Kickstarter, add a comment to the Kickstarter. Just say, I came here from the live Q&A. Just say that as soon as you back. It helps us understand what kind of reach these videos have. And whether you're watching it live or pre-recorded, it's helpful to us. You don't have to, but if you do, it's much appreciated. So with that said, thank you very much for watching, and I'm going to click stop broadcast with the awkward wave moment. Bye-bye.